Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. Assalamu alaikum, and a pleasant welcome to one and all. My name is Ilyas Parker, and on behalf of the Academia Library, it gives me great pleasure to welcome one and all to this most important public dialogue entitled, Who Owns the Cape? It is indeed a distinguished and a privilege for me to welcome the leader of the PAC, Mr. Minister Mzazele Naihonso, to today's panel discussion. Minister Naihonso, thank you for making the time for this important conversation despite your tough schedule and portfolio. Your perspective on land governance and constitutional matters, I'm sure, will add lots of weight to this important panel discussion that we are unfolding here tonight. We are also indeed honored and grateful to have further panelists present here tonight, namely Ambassador Ibrahim Rasool, Dr. Alan Busak, and Mr. Jack Miller, and needless to say, our moderator, Reverend Lionel Lowe. So along with our esteemed panel, we welcome our audience present here tonight, as well as those on our YouTube live stream. We are confident that the panel will inform, enrich, and enhance our understanding, as well as our perception as regards this important topic here tonight. Your presence reflects the importance of informed public engagement on issues that shape our democracy and our future. The Academia Library is honored to host this event. As many of you know, the library is far more than simply a repository of books. It is a community institution dedicated to learning, dialogue, critical thinking, and well as civic participation. It provides a platform where difficult questions can be asked openly, respectfully, and yes, intelligently. As a community facility, the library depends largely on donor funding to continue its community-based programs. It thrives on generosity of individuals like your good selves who recognize the value of education and the preservation of our heritage. Your contribution enables us to maintain our resources and organize programs of this nature. We greatly encourage you all to support the cause, whether through donations, participation, advocacy as well, so that this institution can continue to harbor as a gift for future generations. Tonight's discussion, ladies and gentlemen, concerns an issue that has generated considerable public debate, namely the proposal by certain political parties and organizations that the Western Cape should secede from South Africa and become an independent state. The purpose, however, of tonight's debate is not to persuade anyone to adopt a particular political stance and position. Rather, it is to provide clarity on the concept of cessation, its constitutional, political, and economic implications, and to assist our voters in the forthcoming elections. Our objective is to encourage informed debate, respectful disagreement, and thoughtful engagement. Before introducing our panel, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to place on record that invitations have been sent for those to participate in tonight's discussions, and those were extended to several parties and organizations. The African National Congress was invited. The Democratic Alliance was invited. Premier Alan Winder and the DA leader of the Cape Executive Mayor, Jordan Hill-Lewis, both respectfully declined the invitation. The Economic Freedom Fighters and the Freedom Front Plus were also invited but did not respond at all. The leadership of AZAPO were invited but declined for technical reasons. Ladies and gentlemen, this evening's discussion is being professionally recorded by Hilaal TV as well as live streamed on the YouTube channel. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce Mr. Shabuddin Rumane, the Program Director that's going to take forward the proceedings for the rest of the night. Thank you very much.
Good evening and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to everyone. All right, so I think the introductions were all done and it's correct. Unfortunately, the minister didn't inform the chairman of Academy Library had bailed, unfortunately for good reasons, I understand. We were called about I think about 5:20 this afternoon to say that he can't make it. There was an urgent cabinet meeting, so he wasn't here. But we have in Qasim Khan here today a suitable replacement for him, and he will read out the minister's prepared speech. So thank you once again, as Hilaal has said, for coming here tonight. So our participants today are, as the adverts would have informed you, Ambassador Ibrahim Rasool, who is one of South Africa's most respected, and by the way, he's got a funny middle name, Ibrahim Rasool. It's a Latin name actually, it's called persona non grata. Sorry, I had to put that in. Yeah, it's his new middle name, persona non grata. We all know him throughout his public life. He's been deeply involved in issues of constitutional democracy, reconciliation, social justice, and nation building. And in fact, it's not only nation building, he also heads an organization called World for All. Then somebody that must be introduced, Dr. Alan Busak, nobody knows him. Is internationally recognized as a theologian, author, academic, and anti-apartheid activist. For decades, he's been one of South Africa's leading voices on justice, equality, human dignity, and constitutional democracy. His work has influenced both national and international debates on human rights and liberation. Can we give both of them so far? I think. When I called the next participant, I was very careful on the phone not to say, "Hi, Jack." So I said, "Hello, Jack." That's Jack Miller. Thank you for accepting the invitation. Representing the Cape Independence is the referendum party, not so. It's not. Okay, Cape Exit. Sorry, Cape Exit Party. Jack is an advocate for holding a referendum on whether the Western Cape should pursue independence from the rest of South Africa. He has participated extensively in public discussions on secession, governance, and constitutional options for the province. Welcome, Jack Miller. And then the last person was going to be the Minister Mzanele Nyonso, and unfortunately he's not here, as we said. But I think it's important to say that he represents and is the leader of the Pan-Africanist Congress, and we would have welcomed him as the president. He's long been associated with the Pan-Africanist movement across the globe, across the continent, that places Africa land, unity, sovereignty, and self-determination at the center of South Africa's democratic project. And we would congratulate him, because I think that's an important aspect of this evening. Then our moderator. Moderating this evening's discussion will be Dr. Reverend Lionel Lowe. Dr. Lowe is an ordained minister, academic, educator, and respected public intellectual. Over many years, he's contributed to theological scholarship, civic education, and public discourse promoting ethical leadership, constitutional values, and constructive engagement across political and social divides. Widely respected for his thoughtful and balanced approach to complex issues, he's facilitated numerous public conversations on matters of national importance. Welcome to Dr. Lowe. So we'll keep the formal part very as simple as possible. Allow me, therefore, to briefly explain to you. Firstly, each participant will be invited to present an uninterrupted opening statement. We'll be asking them to speak around 7 to 10 minutes, outlining their position or his position or her position on the questions before us. Secondly, once all opening presentations have concluded, the panelists will take their seats, and then Dr. Lionel Lowe will then make his opening remarks, explain the context and purpose of tonight's discussion, and outline the rules governing the debate and begin the moderated discussion. And then lastly, we ask that the guiding principles for the evening be very simple. We listen respectfully, we seek understanding, even when we disagree, we engage ideas rather than personalities, and we maintain the dignity of everyone present here tonight. Dr. Lowe will then draw on some of the points that's been raised by the individuals, and then throughout the evening there will be opportunities for audience participation, and I think that's quite key, and that's why we've used a larger premises than we would otherwise have done. And then we respectfully ask that audience members keep the questions concise so that as many people as possible may participate. And here I plead, and I'm sure Dr. Lowe would do the same, when you're going to ask a question, not state global policy on some issue or another. And I think as human beings, you're going to say, this, that, the other. But let's stick to the topic, ask your question so we can share as much as possible. Given the fact that we are on YouTube, it's important that we reach out to as many as possible who are probably quite keen to know exactly what the position is, with the different do's and don'ts of secession, etc., etc. So it's an educational process at the same time. That's why we keep the conversations as respectful as possible and make sure that we try and educate and learn from the exercise. And then just housekeeping a little bit. Please don't forget to switch off your cell phones. We are recording this live, so it can be quite irritating when the phone rings and somebody says, "But I told you the Cremora is on top and not not inside." So please switch off your or put them on silent. And if you do need to leave, there's a door at the back, and obviously the exits on my left and right. And then lastly, there's a loo for those who want to use the loos. It's just around the corner from here. There's a passage that runs on side here, and then I think this door too, not so. Just outside this door, all right? Thank you very much for listening. I now hand you over to Dr. Lowe.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's good to see so many of you who have come out this evening. This is an election year, and particularly significant because it's the local government elections, and so there will be many discussions and debates and activity during the year leading up to the 4th of November. And this is just one of such events to open up the discussion and debate. We already have some of the rules set. I'm going to invite the panelists to come up and take your seats, please. So I'm going to suggest that we have each one of the panelists make their contributions, take notes as we go along, and we will open up the floor for discussion at the end of the last panelist, who will be Dr. Busak. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Mr. Khan to present the information that the minister would have shared with us had he been here. And he is the spokesperson for the minister, and will stay up here and hopefully be able to respond to some of the questions that may come from the contribution from the minister. Kasim, welcome.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum and good evening to everyone. Let me start first with a very sincere apology from the minister. The nature of the way cabinet meetings work is that once he's inside, they can't come out until they have concluded for the day. And so he had put in a request that he leave early, and unfortunately the matters under discussion did not allow him to leave. So let me start again. Assalamu alaikum. And for those of you who are very familiar with our slogan, is Walatu. Program Director, Reverend Lionel Lowe, Dr. Ilyas Parker, Dr. Alan Busak, Ambassador Rasool, Mr. Jack Miller of the Cape Exit, Mr. Shabuddin Romane. I hope you're a bit calmer now. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, I greet you tonight, not only, and I will paraphrase, as a member of the Pan-Africanist Congress, but as a guest of a community that has carried among many who have suffered the same fate, the memory of what it cost a people to be told that they do not belong to the whole. The history is well known to you, from the time in 1652 when the land was invaded, to the heroic battles that then ensued in defense of the land, spanning a continuous period of more than 2 centuries. A highly offensive and repulsive part of this history took the form of the brutality of dispossession through the forced removals of communities, which itself was implemented over an extended period. The pain of dispossession from communities such as District 6 and ongoing gentrification of Boekap under the ongoing gentrification of Boekap has emptied this area of families who had lived here for many generations, remains as a vivid reminder of many of you as if it only happened yesterday. The heroic manner in which you and your parents waged the struggle against this terrible act continues to occupy an iconic position in the minds of the oppressed and their descendants all over our country, and it has left an indelible mark on the sands of our country's history. We also stand here to speak to people who know the indignity and injustice of being forced to carry a dompas, whose sole purpose was to demean humanity by deciding where a person could work, could sleep, and entertain themselves. You all remember a city that was once cruelly divided according to a fictional notion that designated some as those who belonged and enjoyed the full citizenship, while others were subjects whose value was no higher than that of slaves. When we come to speak here to you today, above a new line is being drawn, supposedly gentler in its language, but old in its logic. We do not need to convince you that the lines like this have a history. We need only ask you to recognize and reaffirm it again. We are speaking of the secessionist campaign that calls itself Cape Exit. You will have heard its name on talk radio, seen its banners in many parts of Cape Town, and perhaps even signed one of its petitions without quite following where the signature leads. This entity is in actual fact not one organization, but a coalition consisting of the Cape Independence Party, Cape Exit, Cape Independence Advocacy Group, and I'm sure there's other names that will be explained today, and others who might not be as bold as to present their claim and proclaim their membership in public. Since the middle of last year, this entity operates under a single coordinating body and is pursuing the agenda of working towards a privately organized referendum on independence in the Western Cape, timed for 2027. Again, we will be advised of the details of this. Interestingly, those who are affiliated to this entity speak the language of self-determination. They cite the Constitution and they talk of a province where they say no single group holds a majority. And then they conclude on the basis of this absurd and tendentious logic that the Cape is simply different from the rest of the country and it should therefore be permitted to walk away from it. We want to take this campaign seriously enough tonight to answer it properly, not at the level of this week's headline or this month's court papers, but at the level where it actually lives, the level of doctrine, of history, and of who we believe ourselves to be. The Pan-Africanist Congress was founded in 1969 on a timeless conviction that the land that we call Azania and the people who were dispossessed of it, constitute one inheritance, not divisible property. Our founding president, Mangaliso Robert Sobukwe, taught us that Azania is an indivisible whole that belongs to Africans, and he went on to define African as anybody who owes his or her only loyalty to Africa and accepts the democratic rule of the African majority. Taken in this context, the struggle for liberation in Tanzania sought to secure Africa and her resources for Africans, and not for those who now want to wall off the most resourced corner of the country because African majority rule has become inconvenient to their comfort. The sovereignty of Tanzania was won by an entire dispossessed people against a single colonial and apartheid project. It was never returned to them in piecemeal fashion, province by province. It can therefore not be relinquished province by province. Allow us to also draw from the teachings of someone that many of you know and recognize as part of your tradition. I refer here to Dr. Ali Shariati. Writing for an audience, he drew a sharp distinction between what he called nation and ummah. A nation, in his account, is a closed thing bound by blood, soil, and a shared past, and never forgetting where it came from. We understand an ummah to be something else entirely, which is a moving community, bound not only by ancestry, but by a shared direction, a shared struggle, and a shared horizon to which its members walk together. Cape Exit asked the inhabitants of the Western Cape to become a nation in some distorted version of Dr. Shariati's first sense, a closed thing defined by what makes it different from the rest of us, anchored to a fixed identity, fenced off from a shared future towards which it would rather not walk. The PAC's answer then and now is that Tanzania was never meant to be a nation in that narrow sense. It was meant to be something inclusive, consisting of one people walking together towards justice and prosperity. Sobukwe and his comrades in leadership and those that were looked upon for ideological and political guidance, such as Anton Lembede and A.P. Mda, presented the liberation forces and the entire people of Tanzania with a formulation that projected African nationalism as the banner under which the oppressed were to be rallied towards liberation. They also articulated the ideology of Pan-Africanism as a synthesis of African nationalism and Pan-Africanism, and they refined Africanism as a third social force that recognizes the spiritual and material interests of the individual. Indeed, Sobukwe is often quoted to have famously said, "We guarantee no minority rights, but we think in terms of individuals, not groups, and that there is only one race to which all belong, and that is the human race." These formulations constitute the bedrock upon which the PAC's soul rests, and it is the basis upon which we reject Herrenvolkism or white supremacy in whatever guise in which it may present itself. To us, therefore, the notion of secession that is propounded by Cape Exit represents Herrenvolkism in its most dangerous form. That is precisely why this new brand of Herrenvolkism stands to be defeated. Let us now present a part of our argument that Cape Exit's advocates seek to resist the hardest, which is that grammar of this campaign is not new. Apartheid's architects also dressed up the dismemberment of our country in the language of self-determination. They called it independent homelands, and for those they found inconvenient to govern with as individuals, they pointed to democratic difference as the justification for balkanization of the country, and they too insisted that this was about identity and not about race. As we make this point, we do not need to accuse every person who has signed the Cape Exit petition of apartheid nostalgia. Many are simply frustrated, and frustration in the sphere of governance is not in itself dishonorable. However, the structure of the main Cape Exit demand that we are different here, let us go, is the same structure that built the Bantustans. We are not obliged to pretend otherwise out of politeness. Let us bring this phenomenon down from doctrine to facts and data, because the secessionists are fond of speaking of a Western Cape that has somehow outgrown the rest of South Africa on its own merits. However, a serious examination of who's actually buying the ground beneath the argument is very revealing. from 2023 through to 2024, every one of the suburbs in this country with the highest concentration of foreign buyers was situated in the Western Cape. Over 40% of all property transactions above 10 million in this province now involve properties that go to international buyers who are overwhelmingly from Germany, the Netherlands, Britain, and Switzerland. I'm sure some of you wanted to hear that other country's name. In the first months of 2025 alone, overseas buyers poured more than R1 billion into Cape Town properties. The Africa Wealth Report names the Whale Coast and the Cape Winelands amongst the fastest growing concentrations of millionaires anywhere on the African continent. This is not a province lifting itself by its own bootstraps. It is a province that is being bought suburb by suburb by capital that considers itself to be owing this country's dispossessed nothing and intends to give them nothing. Moreover, while European capital buys the coastline, our own internal wealth is moving in the same direction, encouraged by the very party that governs this province. The Democratic Alliance has spent more than a decade building what it calls the Western Cape story, supposedly a brand of competence, safety, and good governance. It has marketed that story quite differently to a particular kind of South African, namely the professional, the retiree, and the small business owner with the means to choose where they live. This is what is called, in the property pages, semigration. It is sold to the country as a neutral, even admirable lifestyle choice. However, a policy that quietly recruits the country's most mobile and most privileged citizens into one province, while that province's own poor on the Cape Flats, in Khayelitsha, and in the farming towns of the Boerland are engaged in an ongoing struggle against landlessness. Lack of adequate housing and water is by no means a neutral policy. It is a systematic process of demographic engineering with better marketing than the architects of the Bantustan policy ever had. Therefore, when Cape Exit points to the demographic difference as part of the Western Cape, as proof that the Western Cape is a special case, we should ask the obvious question of who has manufactured this so-called difference and to whose benefit. A province reshaped by foreign capital and by a political party's recruitment of privilege is not a natural nation discovering itself. It is a gated community seeking to recreate the failed experiment of an apartheid nirvana. As we debate and assess the implications of the Cape Exit phenomena, we must not lose sight of the role and position of land in this context. The province carries some of the country's most unresolved dispossession in the form of historical alienation and ancestral lands of the Khoisan, the Cape Flats forced removals, and the emptied District 6 and Bo-Kaap areas. Program Director. The secessionist project will never, in fact, and is in fact not designed to resolve any of the claims for land justice. As we move towards closing, allow us to refer to something that Cape Exit itself has put in writing, because we should always prefer an opponent's own words to our characterization of them. In its own economic feasibility study of an independent Western Cape, the movement explicitly proposes the adoption of the Israeli model of water security through desalination and treated wastewater as the technical backbone of an independent state's resource sovereignty. We are raising this point not to tell you that some foreign people are coming to take the Western Cape, but because the PAC does not need an invented enemy to make a true argument. I think I'll just skip some of these just to conclude. In closing, to once again proclaim, as our forefathers in the African liberation struggle did before us, that Azania shall be free, Azania shall always be one, and Azania shall always prevail. To every secessionist appeal, however reasonable its grievances may sound on the surface, the PAC's answer remains the one that Sobukwe gave us at the beginning, that there is only one Africa, one people, and we call to inherit it together. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation from the PAC. There were a number of things that were raised there that I would like to address, but would kind of become a bit of a detour from what I thought would be a bit of a brief introduction from my side on behalf of the Cape Independence Movement. But there are a number of points that were raised there that I would like to address, and perhaps we'll do that point by point when we go into the question and answer section. But if we look at this concept of Africa belongs to Africans, what exactly is an African? It was then said by the gentleman from the PAC that Cape Independence would be a racist endeavor. And in fact, it's the complete opposite of that. In fact, the only true rainbow nation in the whole of South Africa, and in fact many parts of the world, is in fact the Cape. The Cape is a melting pot that has been built over centuries. The Afrikaans language is a melting pot language that defines the people of the Cape, be they from Dutch, Indonesian, Malaysian, Khoi, San, whatever heritage. The people of the Cape have a history that goes back centuries, and the Afrikaans language defines that. Whether you're white or brown, Indian or Asian, you call the Cape your home, and you've been living here for centuries. That is, in no way or respect could that be called racist. If we're going to look at racism, let's look at what's happened over the last few weeks. In fact, there was a Tsonga boy that was murdered by Xhosas in Mossel Bay just a few weeks ago. He was murdered because they didn't think he was one of them. A South African with a South African ID, South African citizenship, was murdered by Xhosas because he was Tsonga. So how well is this South African rainbow nation actually going? I had a lovely chat with Dr. Busak and Ambassador Rasool before this, and we had a bit of a laugh. I said to them, you guys sound like Cape Independence Party members, because we were having a frank discussion about the problems in South Africa. And these two respectable gentlemen who have been in politics and deserve the respect of their roles and what they've done for their communities, absolutely. And even these gentlemen are aware of the absolute state of despair that South Africa has become. So what do we want to do? Do we want to keep on flogging a dead horse? The definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over again and to expect a different result. So for those of you who might not be familiar with the history of South Africa is not even the name of a country. It is a geographical location that was imposed on us by the British Empire in 1910 after they committed genocide against the Afrikaners in the Boer Wars. They took these independent territories and by a vote in the British Parliament in 1910 declared that these independent territories would be called the Union of South Africa. Now this Union of South Africa then changed hands, which was controlled by the British, then changed hands to the Transvaal-based Nats, the apartheid government, in 1948. And then in 1994, those same centralized levers of power were handed over to the ANC regime. And here we have, over a century, which is actually not a very long time, where these different political entities have controlled a false unitary state to the detriment of the people who call this place home. So the question for tonight's event is who owns the Cape? In this case, referring to the Western Cape. I think to answer this question, let's broaden our horizon and our perspective on this idea. If you were to ask that same question for the Eastern Cape, what would your answer be? If you were to ask that same question for KwaZulu-Natal, what would the answer be? Well, you could say that the Zulus, who, under Shaka Zulu, in the late 1700s, early 1800s, brought together the different tribes of that area, and in the Imfakane created the Zulu nation. So KwaZulu-Natal, you could say, is owned by the Zulu people. There's a very big Indian community, there's a big English community, Afrikaans community, but you could say that the Zulu nation defines the cultural identity of KwaZulu-Natal. You could say the same thing for the Eastern Cape. The Xhosas are the predominant cultural and linguistic group that owns the Eastern Cape. So let's look at the Cape of Good Hope, the Western Cape. It's much bigger than the Western Cape, but we'll just call it the Western Cape for now. We have a unique and beautiful history that goes back to 1652, and in fact, far beyond that. The Khoi and the San, if we're going to really say who owns South Africa, everyone here is a visitor, except the Khoi and the San. So the Bantu tribes came down in the Bantu migrations, and the Portuguese charted the Cape in 1488. And who did they find in 1488? They only found the Khoi and the San. The Dutch arrived in 1652, and then you had Indonesian, Malaysian, and other influences arriving a few years after that. And there were no women on the boats, which came over with the Dutch. So what happened is the people that arrived on those boats intermarried with the Khoi, the San, the Indonesian, the Malaysian, and we had the beginnings of what is the Cape colored population. Sorry, am I running out of time? 3 minutes. Okay, thank you. So we have a history which goes back, and a lot of people don't know this. Simon van der Stel was a man of mixed race. The most wealthy woman, the second generation in the Cape, was a lady by the name of Anna de Koning, was one of the wealthiest women in the Cape, also a lady of mixed race. So there's this false narrative that these African nationalists try to push. They try to create this racial division and hatred, because communism essentially is a politics of hatred. You need to have an enemy, and once you've got an enemy, you can then persecute that enemy and steal and take and rob from that group. So it's about, essentially, it is an oppressive political ideology. So what we would want to see for an independent Cape is a true rainbow nation. We have a history that is very different to the rest of South Africa. We have a unique language, the Afrikaans language, which is a melting pot language. And in fact, 70% of the Cape population, including the broader Cape, belongs to an ethnic group that is directly discriminated against by the ANC's Black Economic Empowerment. So where these groups are a minority in the rest of South Africa and persecuted in the rest of South Africa, here in the Cape, all these groups together, and the Afrikaans language is spoken by almost 70% of the broader Cape territory. So, and the Afrikaans language is oppressed by the current ANC government. So instead of looking at the past, we would like to look at countries around the world which have succeeded. The speaker before me spoke about international investment as a negative thing, foreign investment. Well, a sign that your country is a stable place for people to invest in is when you have a good, stable economy. And this is what something Lee Kuan Yew did in Singapore. And he also suffered from British colonialism. In 1965, Lee Kuan Yew took Singapore and turned it into what it is today, one of the highest incomes per capita, lowest unemployment, highest standards of living. I don't think people really care about the race of their neighbor if they've got a roof over their head, their children are going to a good school, and there's a bright future in front of them. That is what we would like to bring to the people of the Cape. Let's put race behind us, and let's build a beautiful Cape of Good Hope. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Miller. We invite Ambassador Rasool.
Thanks very much. Assalamu alaikum. Good evening. Molweni. Goeienaand. I want to say that it's great being part of this debate. It may be very useful to put three things up front. I'm wearing the scarf because I believe in one undivided South Africa. I want to say that's what we fought for, and no mistakes along the way must undo it. We must correct the mistakes so that we build this one South Africa that is a home for all. Secondly, I want to say that I love the Western Cape and I love Cape Town with every fiber of my being. My history is here, my future is here, the future of my children are here, and I say that I love it despite the fact that it has been bequeathed an inheritance that no other province has received. It's got a particular demographic because there was a genocide of the Khoi and the San, and it was bequeathed a demographic because there were legislative barriers to Africans doing the natural migration through job reservation acts, colored labor preference areas, and all of those kind of things. The third thing, and therefore it is not possible to superimpose an idyllic picture of a rainbow nation over a tragic history. The third thing that I want to say, because of what I will say later, is that if anyone has reached out and embraced Jews and not as Zionists, it's probably the kind of ANC government that I led once upon a time in the Western Cape, going to the 60th anniversary of Auschwitz when it was unpopular, embracing the American Jewish Committee because they were better than AIPAC when I was in America. And so those were the kind of things you do to redeem a people whose political beliefs have misled them down a path today of genocide. So having said that, I think the fundamental question, and I don't want to get, because I want to admire what Jack Miller has done here today, because he's presenting us with a picture of honest secession. He's put his views on the table, and we can deal with it in that way. He's got to answer the hard questions, and I think, having read their latest literature after a debate I've had with them about 3-4 years ago in Somerset West, I think they're trying to answer the financial fiscal questions of how would you sustain a seceded Cape if the Navy moves out, if the ports that belong to Transnet close, and all of those kind of things. How do you move out when you by and large break even between the 13% income tax that, or taxes that are collected here with the equitable grant and the national inputs and all of those kind of things? I think those are the challenges of reality that will confront them with this. But I think we're indulging this debate because it is exciting us politically. But what I'm worried about is not honest secession. I'm worried about secession by stealth. That's what I think is the challenge here today. And so when I speak about it, Kasim Khan has spoken about the semigration and so forth. And I was very surprised in, for example, Jewish Report to have Jordan Hill Lewis quoted as saying, we're constantly engaging countries around, communities around the country and in the world to sell Cape Town as a place to live and invest. And we'll go to religious groups and business groups and all of those kind of things, he said. And then the Jewish board then says that their primary aim is to entice young Jewish students and others into Cape Town, and that the Jewish Board of Deputies have in fact put up an infrastructure about where the schools are, where the business opportunities are, and so forth to make this possible. So the point that I'm making is that this is not accidental, this is by stealth, and I think no one is against investment, but I think what we are dealing with is a possibility where we must see, is this innocent or is this nefarious? To deal with it differently, the Times of Israel, January 2026, by Grant Arthur Gochan, says, and I quote, South Africa is now unsustainable in its current form. And just to interrupt the quote, I think that my generation of ANC cadres and leaders must take responsibility for creating the impression of an unsustainability of our country, because I think we lost the ball, if I can put it like that. But let us continue. South Africa is now unsustainable in its current form. To avert widespread violence, a peaceful breakup represents the only viable solution. South Africa must lead the way in fragmentation. Voluntary based independence for historical, ethno-cultural homelands. And goes back to the old thing about Xhosas, Vendas, etc. And then adds, along with the Western Cape, and this would replace coercion with consent. And so refers favorably to research done by Cape Independence to make that essential political point that fragmentation must be the objective of South Africa. And so the question, therefore, is if it is nefarious, what is the antidote to this? I think the antidote is to return to the rule of law. In some cases, the law must be consistently and vigorously applied. In other cases, the law must be managed and changed. Revise the rules. So, in one current threat to the rule of law, for example, the xenophobic deadline the cliff that we're facing, amongst many unhappinesses is the fact that despite the law, RDP houses are being sold even if title deeds don't hand over to other Africans, who then rent it back to South Africans. But they needed the cash at that moment. And so then, when you rent what you own and the title deed, those are the kind of reasons that you begin to mobilize. It's not an anti-African sentiment, pure and simple. It manifests as a way to deal with concrete conditions that I think are on the ground. However, on the other extreme, you find that another statistic that Kasim had spoken about, the purchase of land by foreigners. And again, amongst the global community, South Africa is seen as unique because international buyers are, using the statistic that he says, they only constitute 3.7% of land buyers, but they constitute 40%, as Kasim has said, of purchasing all land over 10 million. And the deleterious effect on property prices and crowding out South African buyers, I think, is possibly one of those cases. And then the impact is the unaffordability. But our legal framework gives them the exact same rights uniquely as citizens. And if you look at it, very few other countries actually do that kind of thing where a foreign buyer can come in and just buy up your land. If you look at global practices, countries like Canada, New Zealand, and Austria have bans and limitations on foreigners buying the land. If you look at it, countries like Australia, Singapore, and the UK have surcharges and extra taxes on foreigners buying land. If you look at the UAE and Mexico, you can buy land but in zoned places. And in other countries like the Caribbean, Turkey, and the EU, you must have residency and citizenship and investment in order to buy up. This is the one place you can come to, see a property. I can't see that far, eh? Oh, 1 minute. So that's what happens. So the point that I'm making is that there is this marketing, on the one hand, of the Western Cape to semi-migration and global purchasing. On the other hand, and this is where the suspicion is very deep, there is a consistent underspending and surrendering of provincial infrastructure grants from the Western Cape government, from municipalities in the Western Cape, money earmarked for human settlements, where poor black people must settle, money earmarked for water reticulation, earmarked for sewage, earmarked for the substructure on which informal settlements and low-cost housing can be built. There is a return of such money to the value of 2 billion rand annually to the national government not because they claim capacity to build. They've just fixed the roads in Constantia without it needing to be fixed. But because there was the hockey stick before you surrender money. But they don't mind the money earmarked for the low-cost housing, because the more you don't build, the more you make it uncomfortable for semi-migration when it is black. And so, having said that, let me end. How do we prevent the de facto ceding of ownership? And it's not owned by ethno-cultural, racial groups, religious groups. It's by who then controls the property market, the economic markets, and all of those kind of things. And therefore, I think, one, we must tighten provincialism to prevent a de facto federalism. Secondly, we must amend or change property laws so that it is consistent with global practice and that blacks are not prevented from selling RDP houses, but you can buy whatever you want to in the leafy suburbs. I think we must combat all criminality, whether it is illegality of papers, whether it's illegality of drug dealing, whatever, because that's the antidote to wanting to put racial, ethno labels to it. I think we must stop the idea of states within states, whether it is in parallel intelligence services that run from South Africa, whether it is in the fact that we have people who are South African and against the Constitution and the law fight in foreign armies like the IDF. Because what we do is that we create states within states, and then finally, I think we also need, if I get FICA'd every 6 months because I was once a politically exposed person, I just find my account closed because the bank must FICA me. I think we've got to use those sharp instruments to FICA all the donations that leave South Africa for foreign purposes. Thank you very much.
We invite Dr. Busa to be the last of the panelists, and then we will get to further discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Lowe. Good evening, brothers and sisters, friends. Assalamu alaikum. I'm so happy to be here tonight on this panel, and I want to thank the organizers, because this is one of the most crucial issues that we should be discussing quite clearly, quite openly, quite transparently, and above all, quite truthfully. And so I'm happy to share the stage with my co-panelists tonight. Thank you for the privilege. The struggle we fought for and sacrificed for so much was for one united, undivided South Africa with a non-racist, anti-racist life in our societies, an egalitarian democracy, where the rights of all our people are not just demanded, but protected and promoted under law, with the dignity of all our people at the core and the center of it all. We are not there yet. We are not there yet, not by a long shot, but those of us who remain faithful to what we have struggled for so long, and we remember what that struggle was all about, are determined that we will get there and that nothing should stand in our way. And for this reason, amongst others, it is that I completely and utterly reject the idea of a Cape exit, of a breakup of our country, of the re-Balkanization of South Africa as we knew it under apartheid. That's why, so our response to this attempt that was laid out tonight by my co-panelist, Mr. Miller, is rejected because I believe it is politically scandalous, it is economically disastrous, it is sociologically unsustainable, and it is morally despicable. And I say this for these reasons. It is politically scandalous because it is a denial of everything that our people fought for so long. It is remembering what it is that we stood for. It is bringing back and re-embracing the apartheid that was and trying to re-establish and protect the apartheid that still is. It is economically disastrous because all of its economic framework and its assumptions are based on capitalism, despite the disastrous consequences that that system has had from the very beginning of the invasion of our country up until today, re-embraced by our government in 1994, and still causing our people, the vast majority of our people, the greatest misery that any system can deliver. It is sociologically unsustainable because it ignores the reality of the demographics of South Africa. It twists and perverts the history of our country and of our people, as we have heard tonight. It ignores the realities of the political dynamics on the continent of Africa, and it disregards the fundamental shifts that are taking place on a global political level. It therefore is irresponsible to build a future vision on foundations that by its very conception ignores the reality that it's supposed to take into account. It is morally despicable because it calls upon and feeds upon the most base human instincts that we can have. It is morally despicable because it uses the needs of our people to foster a political solution that is no solution at all. It pretends to speak of independence, while in reality it binds us hands and feet to a new imperialism, to a new colonialist strategy, not just for South Africa, but for the continent. And it pretends to our people that what they will have is a different kind of life, while what they are facing will be a renewed apartheid life that will enslave us all from the very beginning. And so, for me, This discussion is important because all of these issues should be put on the table. I say this because the one name that was not mentioned tonight is the name of Phil Craig, who as a British citizen came to this country and was allowed to register a political party, was allowed to lead a movement that undermines the very constitution that they say that they stand upon. You cannot use the constitution to further nefarious goals that undermines the constitution, that undermines the dignity of our people, that in reality undermines the future that our children deserve. So we must reject this, and we must reject this forcefully and clearly. I have listened to your interview, Mr. Miller, of October last year that you had on Spotify with, I believe, the woman is called the Nicole B. Show. And you raised some of the very interesting points that I hope that we will be able to discuss tonight. So you say, which you also mentioned tonight, you speak of the people of the Cape that we have built, you say, for 400 years. Who are you talking about? Who has built the Cape? On whose backs was the Cape built? Some Peter Blanche reminded us that the undeserved wealth of white South Africa is built and based upon the undeserved impoverishment of black South Africa. So whose backs is this wealth built upon? You mentioned the fact that the Khoi and the San must have their respected place, and so you say also that colored people must be protected and the language must be protected. I wonder what the language will be of this new country that you try to break away from our country that we fought for. So I will leave that there. Oh, no, let me mention this one thing. What is it that you have in mind when Phil Craig writes to Donald Trump to ask him to intervene on your behalf with our people and our government to make sure that this breakaway takes place? What does he have in mind when he talks of Cape, the Western Cape, as a little Israel? Now, my colleague Ibrahim has mentioned that. So what strikes me in this is that you go to two of the most murderous, genocidal, despicable personalities on earth to ask their help, to use their countries as a model for what we have fought for, and that you think you can take away. So my question, with all of this, what is it that makes you think as a white South African that you can do all of this? That you can speak of our people like this, and that you can shape the future of our people. You act, and that's the sin for me in this, as if we are destined to live in a white-ruled world forever. And that is not only wrong, that is absolutely unacceptable. So let's deal with that tonight as well.
We need to say thank you to each one of the four panelists for their contributions that they have made this evening. I am tempted in a way to try and get a dialogue between them going, but I think it would be unfair to you as an audience if we attempt to do that. So let me immediately go to questions from the floor. And I would, again, the appeal was made already that you should not try and make long speeches or solve the whole global problems, but be very specific in the question that you are posing. Secondly, if you have a question for a particular panelist, that you please identify it as such. So I see 2 hands over on my right-hand side, and I see 3 hands down here. Let's stay with those 5 for now. Yeah, please identify yourself, and then very specific question. And if you have a panelist in mind, say so.
Thank you, Dr. Lowe. My name is Zelt Murray. I heard what all the panelists did, and thank you. And I know I'm sitting here with very powerful people in front of me, but as an activist from the student days, I need to ask very pertinent hard questions. Might not probably go well down with everybody in terms of, but also coming from the school.
Pose the question.
The question is, as I'm a descendant of an indigenous of Rosina Bosov in 1813, being a Hottentot from Kanaland. So I also serve as an executive or non-executive director on the Cape Khoi Council as the NPC, and also with my portfolio being finance specifically. So we know the first colonialists came here not in 1652 but in 1400.
Pose the question.
I just need to put some clarity on here. The question is specifically, we abolished the term, the racist, derogatory colored term in 1991. It was brought back in 1996, despite the objection from Dr. Busak. So the question, part 1, is actually, was it intentionally done or changed to specifically not regard the indigenous people as African in particular? Then, and was it done intentionally, specifically? Then there was also the question of South Africa was a signatory to the United Declarations on the Rights of Indigenous People in 2007. Parliament, up to today, 20 years later, refused to pass a motion to Parliament to ratify and to implement this UNDRIP, together with ILO 169, and also the 2018 hearings report, the findings. Up to date also, Parliament refused to ratify and implement that hearings, the 2018 hearings report. And the question is, 32 years later, we've got zero to little restitution and reparations. Will this restitution and reparations to indigenous people ever occur? As we said, actually, the land that belonged to the indigenous people of the Cape need to be returned to them, together with the mineral rights, together with the fishing rights, together with our indigenous knowledge. And I want to know from all the panelists about this. Thank you.
Thank you. Immediately behind her. Behind him, sorry. The lady's hand is up. Yeah. No. 2 questions there and 3 questions down here. We'll get to you. Chair.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much. The question that I would like to put to the panel is the following. Are they aware that the municipality for 25 years has not implemented sections 152 and 153 of the Constitution, which requires 4 things to happen? Namely, number 1, that a municipality should provide basic services, but now the more important thing, it should promote social development and it should promote economic development, and number 4, that it should be done in cooperation and with the involvement of the community, as a result of which a larger part of Cape Town today is unable to unlock what is called dead capital. Because there has been no social development, it's led to the problems, I think, on which the people like Jack are attempting to build the division, whereas the problem lies with the Democratic Alliance for 25 years not having fulfilled and not having complied with the Constitution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The lady's hand is up behind you. And we've got 3 hands here in front.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Suzette Little, and I'd like to address my question to Mr. Khan. In the city of Cape Town, since 2021-22 financial year, the city has released land continuously. We have 10 council meetings a year, and at each council meeting, there's at least a minimum of 10 pieces of land that is released every year. The last land restitution in the city of Cape Town was in 2018. And so we don't see any land restitution happening anywhere in the city, nor are we able to make any land claims, because that has been closed sometime, I think 2016, and we still sit with a "we will let you know" syndrome at that particular department. Now, when this land is being released, the Heritage Foundation claims that there is no heritage claim on the land. Now, you cannot have a heritage claim on the land if that opportunity or that office is closed for you to actually put in your land claim. And there are many families across Cape Town that have never ever put in their claim in the first round or the second round, and it has now been closed. And what I'm really asking you, Mr. Khan, is to ask your minister, why specifically in the Western Cape we don't have that opportunity to lay claim to the land that this DA government is releasing on a monthly basis. And Dr. Busak and the ambassador is correct when they say they are using secession in a stealth mode. It's happening under our noses, and people continuously vote for these people, and they're getting rid of our land. So I'm asking you to please address the matter with the minister. Thank you.
Lady, yes, in front, and two other hands were here in front.
Assalamu alaikum. Hello. My name is Mushfiqa Bota, and I'm going to. Everybody's been asking for concise questions. I really would like just a concise answer from Mr. Miller, because very many of the constituents, specifically because we're human beings first in the Western Cape and South Africa, we want to know. I want to know, as a person who's going to vote, I want to know, will you openly state that Israel is committing a genocide? I don't want semantics. I simply want a yes or no, Mr. Miller. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Megan Goritz. My question is directly for you, Jack. Kan jy Afrikaans praat?
Yeah.
Goed so, meneer. I just wanted to ask you a question quite specifically about what you termed as Malay and other influences. And I want to ask you whether you know that those were slaves.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade Chair. My name is Yusuf Patel. I'm an ex-political prisoner from the Qibla movement. There's one thing that sticks to me while I was in detention. I was detained for about 7 months under the Section 29 solitary confinement. And of 2 of those months, I was detained at Vogwel police station. Because of Section 29, we were detained at various police stations. And I had a nice tour around the country in that period. But in those 2 months at Vogwel, which is a mining town, formerly from the old Transvaal area, weekends, those young reservists would have a sprawl of arresting women with their kids. Those women came to the towns to collect money from their husbands. And because of the past laws, they were not supposed to be there. They are detained on Friday evenings, Monday mornings, they're taken to court, and if they can't pay the fines, then they are detained for 3 to 6 months. Those were the realities. Being there weekend adjacent to my cell, I would hear those cries of the babies, those wailing things. And the mothers.
Your question?
My question here is, why do the government allow such a thing of having to exit this country? Isn't it reasonable? Shouldn't there be a law that actually declare that as treason and put those people into those jail cells? And if not so, give them the boats to row back to Europe and America. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask the panelists. The first question was posed to the panel as a whole. Anyone wishing to respond to that? The first question? Okay. Check. And then, yeah, there are other questions directed specifically to you.
Testing. I think that first question about fishing rights and the rights of indigenous people is an incredibly pertinent one, and that's something that we at the Cape Independence Party we've spoken about from the beginning when I co-founded the organization in 2007. So we've been doing this for 19 years. I would like to point out that yes, there are various different groups calling for Cape independence. I do not speak on behalf of those other groups. I cannot speak on behalf of some of the other gentlemen that were mentioned earlier. They need to speak for themselves. We certainly, everyone within the Cape independence movement does not agree on everything. We agree on Cape independence, but there are some groups that have waded into matters and said things about international affairs that is not our opinion at Cape Exit and the Cape Independence Party. So with regards to this specific issue, we have deep concerns that the ANC and the country that we've found ourselves in over the last 32 years has an inherent racism against the Khoi and the San and the mixed race people of the Cape. The fishing rights, the fishing rights have been taken away from Cape colored fishing communities and given away to black economic empowerment consortiums. And in an independent Cape, we will take those fishing rights back and 100% give them back to those indigenous brown, Khoi, San colored communities. So 100%. And absolutely, with regards to land rights, the Khoi and the San are the first nation, the first people. And you will find that whereas the ANC is very happy to give tribal chieftain powers to every single other tribe across the whole of South Africa, why don't the Khoi and the San have a tribal representative in the government? Why don't the Khoi and the San have a tribal representative in the government? So your concerns that are being raised are more an issue for the ANC government than for us in the Cape Independence Movement. We see the Khoi and the San and the heritage of the Cape colored communities being intertwined in the First Nations. And people love stoking racial division, like I mentioned earlier, amongst those who believe in centralized states, who want to steal from the productive and have to have an enemy. But people who even call themselves white Afrikaners have ancestors that go back to the Khoi and the San or Indonesian heritage. So we do not subscribe to this this perspective. We believe that we're brothers and sisters here in the Cape, white and brown, and the Afrikaans language is a personification of that. And we respect other cultures, but we expect those cultures to respect us. We're not going to go into the Eastern Cape and tell causes how to live, how to conform to our way of life. And we have a way of life here in the Cape that goes back many, many centuries, and we would appreciate that same respect. Thank you.
This Israel and the genocide question was directly...
Yes, absolutely.
Directed at you?
You know, Cape independence is...
Thank you. I think we need to be as respectful as we can towards one another.
I can only fill one seat. I have Khoi and San or coloured members within the Cape Independence Party and the Cape Exit movement that will happily speak to you on behalf of a Khoi and San perspective. And I guarantee you, what I've just said here tonight is a perspective shared by that community.
There's the question on genocide in Israel.
Yes. So international affairs, what we're focused on is improving the lives of the Cape people. And there are many matters that there's Russia, Ukraine. Oh, no. I'm going to answer the question. So you can ask me the question and then I'll answer it.
Let us. Specific question was
yes
on Israel being genocidal. Yeah.
No. No. I represent an organization. And people.
Can we?
I can answer your question. If you don't accept my answer, then there's no point to me giving it. You will get a concise answer from me.
Can we let's give him an opportunity as briefly as you can.
Yes, absolutely. So there are international affairs, be it Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Palestine, be it immigration in America, be it Iceland, and whatever topic you want to choose. There are all sorts of issues around the world. And we will find Cape Independence supporters that sit on either sides of the spectrum on these issues. We do not interfere with the affairs of other countries. Our concern is the way that the Cape people are being treated.
So answer the question on the genocide.
It is international.
Please.
It has nothing to do with Cape Independence, and so therefore we don't have a position on it.
Okay. No, so you are saying that as an organization, that is not a concern of yours.
It has no bearing on Cape Independence, so it is not for us to interfere with
international
affairs.
That's a position. That's okay. Yeah. Can we?
What is your stance? Is Israel committing genocide against the Palestinians?
No. The response we've had, I think we need to move on. We've had a question on land claims and restitution. No, we will come. We'll come back. We'll come back.
It just struck me, Mr. Miller, that you have twice said tonight that as an organization you have really nothing to do with international affairs and they have nothing to do with Cape independence. But if you strive to become an independent country and make the Western Cape that independent country, how in the world can you not have a view on international affairs? That's number one. Number two, I've heard you say, and I quote, "We're in the Cape, brothers and sisters, white and brown." Now let me just say this quite personally. My kids gave me a gift a few years ago to go to this DNA thing, and my DNA came back. The Busaks from Carnarvon have the two major contributions to my DNA is Khoi and San and Nguni. So Dikosa Busakwe is family. How can you say we brown, black? I don't even know what brown means. And so that is what I'm talking about. The assumptions, you say you are not racial, but the assumptions are racist. The assumptions that you work from is divisive. And that is a problem that you will have to deal with, not just in this audience tonight, but as you go and explain yourself to the rest of South Africa's community.
Thanks, Dr. Busak. I was going to come back to give the panelists an opportunity, other panelists, if they wanted to add too. But let us hear Mr. Khan.
Thank you to the two questions. Is it Councillor Little and the gentleman in front of her? I think the guiding point of advice that was given this evening is what do we stand on? What is the legislation of the country? And the legislation of the country, and I'm first addressing the gentleman in front, you spoke about land claims and land that belong to the Khoi and San and so forth. One of the unfortunate things about our transition to democracy is that we had established some strange thing called a date in 1913 from which land claims can be made. Now, this automatically leaves literally millions of Khoi and San who have legitimate land claims across several parts of the country. And this automatically excludes them from it. Now, there are individual families who claim ancestry and communities who claim ancestry, and then they say, well, you know what, we'll organize ourselves into a community and we will apply for application. The advice I would like to give and suggest, and the reason I'm making this almost as a point of advice is because many of the Khoi and San communities approach the office of the minister, and invariably much of those questions land on my desk, sometimes 7 o'clock in the morning. And I encourage people that that aspect of the law, particularly through structures and organizations that you have, that aspect of the law needs to be challenged. Whether it is challenged legally, whether it is challenged politically, because it really does not make sense that a people who faced genocide upon genocide is excluded. Now, this was decisions made during the transition, and it's really important that we establish that part. The second part that I would obviously want to share with you is what the minister shares with many people who claim Khoi and San ancestry, and they then decide they want to challenge land claims or whatever. The first and foremost thing is to be united. Because one of the things that is undermining your claims to land in many ways is there's always a alternate group, an alternate king. Almost every other day there's a new Khoisan king. Now, no disrespect, people have aspirations. And maybe they have genuine royalty in it. I don't care much for royalty. But this is something that needs to be addressed. Now, with regard to Ms. Little's question, so I don't speak most of the time, is, one of the things that we find is you mentioned the 2016 cut-off. Now, the 2016 was an opportunity to reapply. The challenge that we are having was there's something called the Lamosa judgment, which prevented new applications, especially those that came up to 2016, to be addressed. Meaning everything that was done by 1998 needed to be completed first. Now, this is a court ruling. It is creating much frustration, right? So this is just a broader context. So with regard to specific land claims and your specific points about pockets of land in the city and things like that, I think that when we deal with an actual example, now I know there's pockets of land near that fruit and veg in the city, I see your thumbs up, which for me is fascinating because I cannot see that land other than that being old District 6, right? And for almost every other year, the city always announces that it's going to rebuild something there. And for as long as I know, there's nothing coming up, and the land is still there. Now, that land must be under some land claim. That is why the city is actually just playing political games with these things. So my advice, Councillor Little, is that if there's specific things, specific pieces of land that you want to speak about, that you want to highlight, as I've done just with a District 6 matter with your colleague Brett Heron, spoke on the 16th, by the 19th we had the matter sorted out, whatever. One of the benefits that I have is that I'm not a public official, a bureaucrat. So I cut through all of those things and I say I want an answer. So wherever I can assist, please do let me know, and then we can pick up on the specific piece of land and we can address them as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll come back to you, Ambassador. There's another question that you need to respond to, Mr. Miller, and that is on Malay and other influences in the slaves.
The question was, am I aware that Malays came over as slaves?
Yeah.
Yes, no, I'm fully aware of that. Sorry? Yes, yes,
Yeah.
from Batavia and all those.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, we
I think
understand.
I understand
We
the question. Yeah, so absolutely, this was a time around the world where horrific things like this were taking place. But I think there's a misperception about the history, and it's so the VOC, the Dutch East India Company, had a specific legal restriction that they were not allowed to persecute the Khoi and the San. And there was the agreements, there were two agreements that were reached between the Dutch and the Khoi and the San. And that was with regards to territories up to Saldanha, and then on the other side to Gordon's Bay. So there was interaction.
The Malay and slaves.
Yeah.
Was the question.
So yes,
The awareness of that.
So yes, of course, we know, and this is why the largest population group in the Cape is of mixed race, and many of the people who call themselves Cape Coloured go back to Malay, Indonesian heritage, and obviously Dutch and French heritage as well. So this is the melting pot nation which made the Cape what it is. And very importantly, the genocide, there's talking about genocide of the Khoi and the San. There was no genocide of the Khoi and the San. I'll tell you where there was genocide. I'll tell you where there was genocide. There was genocide in the Bantu migrations from Central Africa. Why do you not have mixed race populations in the Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal? Because the Khoi and the San were wiped out from Central Africa. The one place where the Khoi and the San were not wiped out was here in the Cape, where they intermarried with the Dutch settlers. And that's why we have mixed race people. So the Khoi and the San were wiped out, and also the other tribes, the Imfakana, the Shaka Zulu, wiped out the other tribes, which is why we have Lesotho, an independent country in the mountains, because between historical records, between 1 to 2 million other black tribes were killed by the Zulus in the Imfakana. The same thing happened to the Khoi and the San. Whereas in the Cape, we intermarried.
Okay. Ambassador Rasool, you wanted to add before we open for more questions.
No, I just wanted to respond to one or two of the questions that were raised just by way of affirmation. I think, Zelt, the best reparations or the best restorative justice are systemic ones, not once-off gifts. It is the restoration of land. It is the participation in the economy, including fishing and other things. And I think that Dr. Busak and I, and it's so great to hear Kasim Khan having to speak for government here. But I'll do the when we. I think very clearly the way we approached the issue of the Western Cape and the issues of empowerment, we artificially but very definitely did a 50-30-20 formula based on populations, and that was the amount of tenders, that was the value of contracts, that was employment, and all of those kind of things. I think that still stands as a very clear milestone that has gone, for some people it was just in the interest to adopt national statistics, even though they ostensibly were against it. But they did it because it does lead to the kind of things the same thing I would say on fishing rights. We were very clear, and we got Minister Vali Musa to agree to it, that the shoreline belongs to local communities, that the Middle Sea belongs to black consortia, and that the deep sea, we don't have the boats and so forth to go and catch the tuna and the Patagonian toothfish near Antarctica. So I think we try to. One of the things that I look back and regret is that in a moment of great triumph, and Lionel knows it, we thought, because District 6 and other land resorted nominally within provincial government, the law states that we needed to hand it over to local government in order that they put the services in place before handing over, so that service land is handed over. We did that by 2006, handed it, Tasneem Essop signed the thing, handed it over to the city of Cape Town, and since then, we've had everything, including well-meaning stuff, such as reopening the claims. The point of the matter is that the reopening of the claims had created the conditions for not handing anything over. And we can now look at it and say, oh, it's infighting, rather than anything else. But we were at a program with people like Anwar Nagia and them, and the new claimants insisted that someone like Anwar must be out of the picture. And that played right into the hands of it. The last point I want to make very quickly is the point made about the last 25 years. I think it's just confirming the point about why we return infrastructure money year after year. It can't be accidental, it can't be capacity, it is because the Western Cape is not going to make itself attractive for the poorest of the poor, so that we can continue to speak about white and brown as opposed to the other colors of the rainbow.
We will go to another round of 5 questions. I saw a hand in the middle there. We've got 2 hands up here and 1 there. 2 next to each other.
I know my question wasn't answered. Why isn't this declared as treasonable?
Why?
Treasonable.
Yeah, I think when we are proposing something, a serious action such as something to be declared treasonable, it requires a law to be enacted. And I think, if we do not mobilize sufficiently against such a law to be enacted, we can make demands and claims in public spaces like this, but it's not going to happen until we actually have sufficient support on the ground and put pen to paper, and as our activists in the Palestine Solidarity is doing now for an apartheid act to be put together. So it takes hard work to do that. There is obviously something else, that is interesting about the South Africa that we live in and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. We are reminded always that we were to be very careful what we can say publicly, otherwise the apartheid government would imprison us, even just having banned literature or things like this. The new government and the laws and the Constitution that we have has created an openness for even bullshit to be spoken about. And I think we must respect that. And we respect, and we want to applaud the organizers of this event, particularly because we're giving these people a platform that we would have been denied. When we declared we wanted a one Azania, one South Africa, or whatever, and they wanted 9 or 11 Bantustans, they would imprison us for that. And what we are doing is we are saying, say something. And if you want it to be treasonable, then let's mobilize against that. But these are the platforms for it. I just want to end with one last point, which I think is very, very disgusting. The person asked about genocide. It's not just a word. It means masses of people were killed just for existing. Now, I'm going to tell you something, just one place, one word, okay? And many of you have driven through this place. Have you know about the Kloof Pass? You know that bastard called De Stoit? He massacred the Khoi in that area, who lived in that area, right? He massacred them, and he was awarded the name of that entire area. So don't deny our people that you want to even just eliminate that event even happened and said there was no genocide here. Please, this is disgusting.
We have to move on. We have to be fair to the others.
Sorry,
who
can
want
I respond to these questions?
We need to move on. Can I take the hand in the middle? There were 2 hands here, and there was there's right here in front. Okay, go ahead, but we're not missing your hand in the middle there.
Mr.
yeah.
Miller, I'm Dr. Elma Ross. You might have seen my letter about Cape Exit in the newspaper. I want to ask you just one question. I used to live in Far East Asia, and I saw the pain of the division of the two Koreas. Can you refer us to the file you might have developed, since you are a responsible person, on how to prevent brother fighting against brother should this happen between the two new states that you envision? Thank you.
Thank you. This in the middle there. Thank you. We'll come back. We'll come back to you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Amin Mohammed. First of all, I find Mr. Jack Miller, if I can just make a contribution, please. I find Mr. Jack Miller very immaturely, he doesn't know much about
Can
things
you pose
happening.
your question? Not
So I just want to ask him, first of all, your organization, what is your aim? Number one, I know that it is to own the Cape, but what is, do you perhaps, I can't now get to the word now, but I just want to ask you, just find you attractively very dishonest. Very, very dishonest.
But ask the question, what do you want? What is it that you want to know? I don't think we must become personal.
Yeah, okay.
Ask the question.
I'll let it go by. It's
Okay,
fine.
thank you. There are two. There was someone in front.
This is on.
Judge, and then two questions next to each other.
Let me just start off by saying this.
Introduce yourself.
I'm Siraj Desai. Mr. Miller, things like I'll have to address you all the time. The question that Musifika asked you about Palestine and Israel, it's the most important moral issue of our time. Your inability to express some sentiment in that matter diminishes you and diminishes all of us that we have in our midst. It's a hang as a badge of dishonor in your favor. Secondly, you spoke about the hateful communism. I don't know what you premise your history. You know the history of humanity from the 2nd century with the Spartacus and the Levelers to Karl Marx in the middle of the 19th century to the triumph of 1917. You will notice that all of it was an enormous battle to improve the life and content of humanity. What you are uttering sounds more like what Faroud said in those hateful communism. The exact words that Faroud used. I would suggest very kindly to you, sir, that if you have no idea what communism is all about, I'm not saying I'm a communist, but what the history of communism is all about, I would suggest you peruse my library sometime. Sit there in my library and read about it. That will improve your knowledge of all of us. Third issue on today's question.
Please.
I'm coming to the question, but I had to correct the historical falsification that he put forward. I'm sitting in this audience. Thirdly, the referendum issues that died in the last century. In the turn of the last century, when Dalla Uma was the Minister of Justice, young white lawyers approached him to hold a referendum on the death penalty after the Constitutional Court has ruled against it. Dalla looked at them, and I was sitting in the meeting. He smiled at me and he tells them, look here, I'm quite happy to take such a resolution to Parliament to be approved on one condition. You agree with me that I simultaneously take a resolution to Cabinet to have a referendum on land redistribution in this country. The lawyers faded away. So that ended the issue of it. Referendums are issues of political choice. You can call 100 referendums now. We won't vote and we won't accept the outcome of that referendum. And simple as all that. The issue of land, finally, Lano, the issue of land is not as complicated as everybody wishes it to make. We have, as my brother Alan correctly pointed out, a virulent capitalist society. Land is purchased and bought as it is. wild elements at play. The other is for the state to own all the land in the country. It's not communism, maybe a rational alternative. But the third, more acceptable solution would be the one that my brother Rasul proposes, that we have the restrictions on land ownership in this country, that laws be enacted to regulate foreign ownership of land, and that be strictly enforced. And Ibrahim, the third one is this. In England, you can't buy more than one house. So why must the South Africans have tons of houses, one in Seapoint and one in Constantia? So that sort of home ownership in a land which is not land shortage, but the housing shortage, that sort of approach should be ended. It deals a bit of imaginative thinking on thinking on the part of the province. I just one last point to make.
Thank you. You've made many comments.
Yes.
Can we move on?
Okay.
There are two questions there, and the gentleman. Yeah.
My name is Philip Copeland. I'm from the Pan-Africanist Congress. I'd like to direct a question to you, Dr. Lowe. Please, I've listened for an hour and a half to political grandstanding, particularly from your panelists. Can you ask them one simple question for me, please?
You ask the question.
You ask your panelists, who owns the Cape? Give it to me like the genocide question. Who owns the Cape? That's why we came here.
Thank you. Person next to you.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Michael Koopman. Thank you to the Academia Library for hosting such a brilliant event. My simple question is for all of the panelists. I would like to know, within a democracy, does the minority have the right to secede from the majority? Thank you.
Thank you. And then last question, the gentleman. Ja.
Goeienaand, my naam is Kobus. Ek glo julle kan hoor ek praat my moedertaal. En ek groet julle almal vanaand. Ek moet sê ek is 'n kandidaat gemeenskapsverteenwoordiger van wijk 15 en ek staan vir Cape Exit. En ek wil een punt maak as ek mag, as ek my respek teenoor almal kan betoon en ek vra my leier, can I please answer the question of the genocide? Sal julle my toelaat? Hulle sê dat politiek en geloof kan nie saamloop nie. Is dit waar? Dit kan. Dit kan, want politiek kan nie 'n geloofsaak antwoord nie. As jy gaan kyk na die beweging van Zionism en Judaism, die politieke kant van Zionism maak dood. Maar Judaism staan op vir die bou van lewe. Vanaand uit my skrif uit van Rigters 1 staan ek vas om te sê dat in Palestina, in Palestine, genocide is committed. Yahweh never asked for blood of children and women to flow. But the synagogue of Satan came and take life. So who are we to decide who lives and dies? If the judgment stays in the hand of Avi Yahweh and Allah. You must understand me tonight. And this is my question tonight. We all sit in the same situation. Politics divide us, break the people, break morals, and puts us all in the same position. This is my question tonight to the panel. When the blood flows in our streets and we can't save the little bit that we can save as a community and as people, who buys? Who rules then?
Thank you. Can we ask our panelists, can we start off, Dr. Busa, can we start off with you? Any of the questions that you would wish to respond to?
I think Mr. Yusuf Patel's question has to do with why government allows this to happen. But you see, when in your secret talks between the elites of the African National Congress in exile and the elites of the old white apartheid capitalist class. When in those secret talks you come to agreement, for instance, that there could be such a thing as an Orania, what moral leg do you have to stand on when Orania becomes the Western Cape? And so that is an issue that one must take to those who made those decisions and those who are in government, who refuse to, when they have the opportunity. The ANC had a 2/3 majority for how long? And they never even tried to change Article 25, even Article 25, that guarantees that our people will almost never get their land back, and that leads us to where we are now with ownership and all of this. So I just think that the solution to all of these problems that we mentioned is not secession. No white man is going to steal my country away from me any more than they have done already. That's not the point. The issue is in the solutions that my friend Ibrahim Rasool has articulated so well. All of those things can be done only if you have a government that is responsive to and responsible of the people. The government that we have now, forget it. My solution is you got to stop this nonsense right now, stop the GNU train, stop the political system that has become so corrupt that we get only crooks and criminals and land thieves to be our rulers. That's where we have to begin, and we have to sit down and map out a new kind of governmental structure, voting structure, everything that has to do with the future of our country, so that we can, with governmental power rested in the people, begin to undo the injustices of the past that we have let live on up until this now moment.
Yeah.
Ambassador Rasool has the floor.
No, just a quick add-on to what Alan said, and to answer the question of treason in a way that makes it practical for us to access it. We have a Bill of Rights, where Article 7 gives people like Mr. Miller freedom of expression, freedom of association, and so forth. It is the one article in the Bill of Rights that is subtended by a condition. You do not have the right to free expression when hate speech, animus, and conflict is incited. But I'm putting this to you because then we can do the test for the case for treason. The other thing about the hierarchy of our Bill of Rights is that Article 7, amongst others, have to respect the preceding articles. So if the freedom of speech and association and advocacy of the Cape Exit impinges on the equality of people, on the dignity of people, on the freedom of belief of people, etc., then that right is subject to preceding rights. So what I'm saying is this: why don't we, if this is a concern, test it first in a Chapter 9 institution, maybe the Human Rights Commission, to check what it is before we take it any much further. I really think if we want a practical thing out of this, let's see who can do the kind of test that I think we need to be able to do. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I don't know much about the Koreans, but I hope we beat them tonight. And then again, I think that the issue of referenda, I agree completely with Judge Desai. Referenda come and go, they can be advocated for, you can have it or you don't have it. It depends whether how many people would want it. But you know, constitutions often are there to protect people against their angriest self. That's what constitutions do, and that's why we don't have referenda on death penalties. Not because it could get a majority, But the Constitution and the Bill of Rights protect you against the moment when you are upset like hell. The same thing with land. You don't have a referendum on it. You've got to move to it because we know what the outcome would be, but you've got to then protect it against a variety of emotions that you have. And I think much the same thing would, the practical questions, should only Western Cape people vote on secession, or is that a national debate? You see, don't worry yet. Don't panic. This is wishful thinking. Don't panic, but act. Put the markers in place. Put the tests on treason and stuff like that in place. Check whether there's divisions being fostered, whether there's animus and conflict in the offing. So don't get angry, get even. So that's and we have to decide whether this is a referendum that we could have. And the question is, Cape Exit is banking on winning a majority in the Western Cape against a minority, but I think the key question is, are they the minority in the country? So that's putting the question differently. And then, who owns the Cape? The Cape is our common property. It belongs to South Africa, it belongs to the people of South Africa, it belongs to our nation. But the fact of the matter is, what I am particularly warning against is that our ownership is being eroded by stealth. And therefore we don't want to wake up one day and find that the prime land is all gone, as it may have gone. The ownership may even be non-racial. It could be rich Germans, or it could be the oil rich of Angola. I don't care. It is that there is an infraction of law, that a law needs to change, because at this moment it's legal, but we know it's not moral, and therefore the law must catch up to our sense of ethics on a matter like that. Thanks very much.
Jack?
Thank you.
Mr. Miller?
Yes, so there's a great list of clauses in the Constitution that guarantee our right to self-determination and secession. Section 235 states it very clearly. Section 127 guarantees the right to referendums called by premiers. Section 231, 232, and 233 all bind us to international law, as well as the Bill of Rights, in which there's a tremendous horde of legislation and charters in the United Nations, etc., that guarantee the right to self-determination. So the legality of Cape, legality of Cape independence is not in question. In fact, the National Prosecuting Authority, the NPA, they made a statement on this when there was the Abutembu king in the Eastern Cape. He was wanting to declare the Abutembu territory independent and break away from South Africa. And the National Prosecuting Authority said that this is not, in fact, a legal matter. In fact, it's a political matter. So the truth of the matter is, if the people of the Cape want independence, they have the democratic right to vote for it. And so, Ambassador Rasool is 100% correct. This has to be done legally and politically. And so this is why we are offering people the political opportunity to put an X peacefully on a piece of paper and to save the Cape from the absolute collapse and destruction that we've seen over the last 3 decades. So the next point is it legal? Yes, of course it's legal. And peaceful secession? Well, I mean, look at South Africa as it is today. We already have 2 independent countries. It was earlier said that we can't have states within states. Well, I'll tell you, we have 2 states within states right now. Lesotho is an independent country. Swaziland is an independent country. In fact, we might be one of the only countries in the world that have 2 independent countries within our borders. Why? Because South Africa is not a natural country. The British Empire forced us into the Union of South Africa in 1910. All these territories were independent in various different forms through centuries prior to 1910. So many people this evening have said the issue that they have with colonialism. Well, you know what? We share that issue. Let's put an end to colonialism. Let's put an end to the primary problem of colonialism, and that is artificial borders. Let's get rid of this British Empire colonial construct called the Union of South Africa, and let's return us to what we were prior to that. So, no. See, history didn't start in 1948. Anyone who knows the history, go back past 1910, and you'll find that we were independent territories. So, South Africa, people who want South Africa to remain a unitary state, you are doing the work of the British Empire.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, so talking about division. The Cape Independence Party and Cape Exit wants to put an end to division in this country. So Jimmy Manyi, who on behalf of the ANC, Ambassador Rasool was talking about how the policies were implemented here in the Cape. Jimmy Manyi said, there's too many colours in the Western Cape. You need to get out. Now you tell me, is that not divisive? Is that not racist? This is the type of racism that we want to fight against. We want to respect all the other communities and tribes and language groups within South Africa, but please respect us too. That is all we're asking for. Let the Cape look after the people of the Cape. Charity starts at home, first come, first serve. We see people arriving here, primarily from the Eastern Cape, getting houses over and above local communities. We've got members in Mitchell's Plain and the Cape Flats who've been waiting for houses for 20, 30 years or more, who don't have houses, whereas you have people who've come here from the Eastern Cape and, in fact, other parts of Africa who are sitting with RDP houses. So I like the question that was asked there. Should you be able to own more than one house? Well, I'll tell you what. A lot of the RDP houses that are owned here in Cape Town are owned by people from the Eastern Cape who own houses in the Eastern Cape. So I think that we should be making sure that if we're going to be giving... sorry, am I allowed to answer this question? I'm going to be heckled. Am I going to be heckled through this entire thing? Or do you want to hear the answer?
Finish. Can we allow him? No, can we?
Okay.
No, can we allow him to finish? Please.
So General Mkwanazi said, General Mkwanazi said in KwaZulu-Natal, we don't want police officers coming here who do not respect the Zulu culture. All we're asking for is the exact same thing that General Mkwanazi is asking for KwaZulu-Natal. We're asking for the same thing here. We want police officers to be from the Cape. We want nurses to be from the Cape. And we want people who look after the Cape people.
Mr. Miller, Mr. Miller, Mr. Miller. Mr.
Okay,
Miller,
so in Mitchell's Plain,
please, folks.
In Mitchell's Plain, we have police officers that aren't from Mitchell's Plain, nurses that aren't from Mitchell's Plain. You go into Pick n Pay and Checkers, and the tellers don't speak Afrikaans. They're not from the community. Now you tell me, is that not discrimination? Is that not racism against the people of the Cape? All we're asking for is to put the people of the Cape first.
Thank you.
Okay, so I agree that we shouldn't own more than one house, especially RDP houses. Who owns the Cape? Well, I asked that question right in the beginning. Who owns the Eastern Cape? Who owns KwaZulu-Natal? Who owns France? Who owns Germany? You can ask the same question for the Cape. We have an identity that goes back centuries, and you will know the answer to that question.
Okay, thank you.
And then to the final question, does the minority have the right to secede? Absolutely. The minority is a majority in the Cape. The people who are a minority in South Africa are a majority in the Cape. It's like going to the Sothos in Lesotho and saying, you're a minority in South Africa, we're actually going to annex Lesotho and make it part of South Africa. So this is the primary basis of self-determination. Communities who are a majority in their own community have the right to self-determination. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, let me just be very brief because one of the things that is a challenge in a discussion like this is firstly when you have a obfuscation of history, when the history that one set of us are talking about and another set is talking about is if we are living in two different countries. The second point that I find absolutely interesting about the Cape that wants to be exited. Now, I think I've seen these maps that show the Western Cape province as we have it now. Is that correct? You're talking about the Western Cape province?
No, it's actually a much larger territory than that.
Okay, even more problematic.
So basically,
So if
just don't take my time, but just give me a quick.
Oh no, you asked me
All
a
right.
question.
Yeah, so is
You
it
would
the
ask-
Western Cape? Or?
It's
Yes,
a bigger
it is the
area.
Western
Okay,
Cape.
Thank you.
But
So,
you got-
so I'm again, the question that comes to mind about it is, who drew those lines? Who named it? You understand? And the people who lived here didn't draw those lines. Okay, I don't know what you're agreeing on, but I want to. You're not doing us any great favor when you are trying to tell us that the British did this. We know this. We know that they came to take the country. We know about the 7 wars of dispossession that had taken place in the Eastern Cape. And again, my words are not just emotional words when I say the genocide that had taken place through those 7 wars of dispossession. If you read the history, you will find that the first people who had lived in those areas came here, and I shudder when I say those things, came into Cape Town hungry and wanting to live because their land had been decimated, their leaders have been killed, their cattle have been destroyed, their livelihoods have been destroyed. They came to find a livelihood because of what the British had done in those areas. There was a genocide here. So we must not undermine and obfuscate history just because it suits us very easily right now. The second thing is a critical point about this word called dignity. When we talk about dignity, we also talk about the autonomy of a people, the self-worth of a people. Now, when we are just glibly using those words to motivate a particular need of ours now for secession, then we are seriously undermining how we are viewing each other as human beings. And I think this is the part that we need to keep in mind, that the hurt that division causes, the hurt and the separation is not something that you just undermine and write off. Well, that was history. Somebody drew a line and you're on that side and you have less and we have more right now. My just quick answers to the Cape, I think, and on the minority issues. Firstly, I do not want us to ever think of ourselves, having been born in this land, as being a minority. I tell this to many people that I come, you are a part and parcel and have all the rights of every citizen of this country. And so you must never ever motivate for and create this idea of a minority, because the moment you do that, you are again advancing this idea of dividing the people, right? The point about owning the land, yes, I am as free to own and be part of any part of this country based on what the Constitution allows us to do. And so I am very much in favor, and I think this is the part that we need to be able to motivate for. There's a part in the Constitution that Dr. Alan Busak referred to as Section 25. You know what's the interesting thing about Section 25? It has a strange name. It's called property rights. Yeah? And this is the part that sickens us about that Section 25, because that makes it possible for anybody just to be able to grab a piece of land and buy it. You don't need to have any connection with it. You don't need to care about who lived on it. So you can come from Germany and not respect who lived there, what their connection with that particular land is. And I think when we are having debates like this, we must also create opportunities for areas that we can mobilize, and areas in which we can demand changes to the Constitution, and areas that we can create a better, united South Africa.
Folks, I think tonight has been a celebration of our Constitution and our democracy, because we've had open discussion, different views that could be shared openly, frankly, and I think it's a celebration of who we are. Secondly, I would like to say that given the sense from the audience, we are very clear that we believe in a united South Africa. We want to say thank you to each one of the panelists. Thank you for your contributions. I'm going to hand over to Shabuddin to ask the question about where do we go from here.
Yes, thank you so much, people. I think we've had, we could probably go on for another 2 hours, yeah? But Bafana's playing, so it's not finished now, so we can take a bit of a rest. Is it 1 o'clock? 3 o'clock, yeah. So maybe you can get up for Fajr a bit early. So, Tahajjud, yeah. But thank you so much. I think, at Academia Library, we use these opportunities to also promote our work. And we often remind people that we operate the library on love, fresh air, and your donations. And in fact, the donations, we call it the Kanala Boxie. So if you paid for it, thank you so much. It helps us a lot. Pay the ticket, but if you have a few loose cents in your pocket, the card machine is still outside, and help us. If you don't have anything now, send some money to us. It helps us to do precisely what we've done today. And I think it's unique in very, very many ways that we've pulled this one off. It's been broadcast live on YouTube, so probably thousands of people, hopefully, have watched this. And it's a learning curve for all of us here in the dangers and perhaps the positivities that we may have taken from the exercise. And I like what Lionel said. It's a necessary evil for us to confront if we feel it is an evil. And at the same time, it means that we are practicing democracy in a very civil way. And that's beautiful as far as I'm concerned. We can agree to disagree and disagree to agree also. So that's I think, the kind of dimension that we've tried to produce here tonight. And my question now to us here would be, all of us, including the panel, what are the next steps? Do we go home calmly and prepare for Bafana? Or do we communicate with Academia Library or any one of these panelists to say, people, we've had a wonderful discussion. By the way, there's coffee and tea outside. And nogal, because it's Cape Town, sisters. Kan jy dit glo? Kan jy dit glo? In the middle of winter, and it's not on a Sunday either. For those of you who don't know, Sunday morning is Sister Day in Cape Town. So if you go to Boekap and some places on the Cape Flats, Sisters is the Sunday morning, very, very important little bit of eatable that we can have. So do we talk about it now? Maybe take 2-3 minutes, or do we kind of find a way to communicate with each other, with the library, if that's what we want to do? There are no rules here. We're trying to formulate something, and we in fact, myself and a couple of my colleagues here, we're trying to get younger people in particular, and I'm glad that there are young people in the audience, to become activist people. We're going to lose this country, whether it's seceding from the rest of the country, or in any other way, from the kind of criminality that we're now experiencing. We're going to lose this country. So we need to find ways and means of making sure that we have our voices heard. And one of the panelists said, we may need to consider redoing the Constitution completely. That's where we are now. And that's what the Constitution allows us to do, if sufficient numbers of us promote the idea that we cannot just simply import the Westminster system of government and run according to colonial product that we kind of inherited. Because that's what we have now. It includes our education system, our political system, our health systems are determined, even our municipal systems, by the way. Every regulation at municipality is a British regulation that we've adapted for local use, but not sufficient to address many of the issues that we've had here tonight. So there are many other things that we need to consider, but it means activism. It means that we need to get involved, roll up on sleeves, and make sure that we work for it. I know that there are many other issues that needs to be handled, but this is important. Otherwise, we will allow the legacies, the inheritance of our children and their children to be stolen, people. That's the important part. Whether we agree with Jack or not is not so much the issue as is the issue of making sure that we hang on to what we have at this point in time. And if we don't do that, it's going to be lost, as America has been lost. As America has been lost. It's a lost case. I mean, they've got a... sorry, I'm going to speak. That's actually a very good point. Organize another event, you can have more money. We don't mind, and that's phase 2. That is why I'm asking, should we have it now or call another session of this nature and have that discussion here? All right? 1, 2, 3, the majority. Majority. So we'll plan another one maybe in a month's time, 6 weeks' time, and there we go. That's important. There are only 4 months elections. So I'll speak to my colleague, Dr. Parker, and the rest of the panel, which will include Jack, to see how best we can organize another one and have another conversation. In the meantime, thank you so much for attending this evening. It was really wonderful to have you, and thank you so much for supporting the library and the initiative that you've had. Tea and persist outside.